Welcome to Whips in the Dungeon 201.29. Today we're going to talk about shot-loaded bullwhips versus natural belly bullwhips. Sometimes you'll hear me refer to a natural belly bullwhip as an unloaded bullwhip as opposed to a loaded bullwhip, which would be a shot-loaded bullwhip. So all those terms are interchangeable in my mind. My question is, you find a whip at a vendor's mart, or you buy a used whip, or you order a whip and you're not really sure how the whip was made. How do you tell whether a whip has shot in it or whether a whip is natural belly? Well, I'm going to give you some tips. There's no 100% sure way of knowing whether a whip has shot in it or is unloaded unless you cut the thong open with a knife and examine the inside. But without destroying a whip, what are some tips for doing this? We're going to take a look at two Mike Murphy bullwhips. Both of these bullwhips were made, this one was made in 2000, this was made 2004 time frame. We're going to look at these whips and just look at them. If you look at those whips, this whip has a thicker profile and this whip has a slimmer profile. Maybe the one that's thicker has shot in it. Okay, now Mike was an Australian whip maker, and Australians typically make unloaded whips. Whereas, and this has changed some in recent times, but traditionally American whip makers made bullwhips that had shot in them. So I would say if a whip maker was from America, you could suspect that it was shot loaded, although in more recent times, modern American whip makers have started using more and more Australian techniques, and you'll find an awful lot of American whip makers that are making great natural belly bullwhips. But that would be one factor to consider. If it's a U.S. whip maker, it might have shot in it. If it's an Australian whip maker, it likely is unloaded or natural belly. However, the profile is also another clue. This Mike Murphy with the thicker profile, we suspect has shot in it. This red one with a thinner, slimmer profile most certainly doesn't have shot in it. Another way is just wait, feel the whip. They're both 4-foot bull whips. This whip is significantly heavier than this whip. You could actually coil them up and put them on a scale and weigh them. We're not going to do that. We're just going to go, well, this feels heavier. This feels lighter, okay? Now I'm going to ask you to pretend these whips aren't bull whips, but they're snake whips. If I grasp that whip above the pineapple knot around the thong, it's going to throw like a snake whip. Well, sports fans, snake whips have shot in them. So if you have thrown a snake with shot in it and you know how it feels, right? You throw a bullwhip and you grasp that bullwhip before the handle, it should throw kind of like a snake whip with shot in it. So we're going to see how that works. Hear that crack? I'm not throwing it with the wood handle. I'm grasping it like a snake whip, and I'm having absolutely no trouble cracking that whip. So that whip has shot in it. Okay? Now realize we're comparing the master against the master, two Mike Murphy whips. So I'm going to grasp this one that I suspect is unloaded the same way. And this is Mike Murphy. So his whip, for God's sake, he was the god of whip makers. So sure, his whip naturally wants to crack, and his unloaded bullwhip does crack even when thrown like a snake whip. But you can definitely tell the difference, and you definitely know that this whip is not shot loaded. So there's some ideas, some pointers. Good luck figuring out whether the bullwhip you own has shot or is unloaded.